everyone awake? How's that hangover? So? Okay. I'll try. I'll speak very softly so that you know that no one gets sick. Thanks for having me. Hello, Floripa. My name is Heiko. I work at Huge in New York. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm not from the US originally. Anyone take a guess where I'm from? Nope. I'm from Germany. So there's a German accent in there, 7-1. Sorry, I had to say that. But I lived in Australia for 15 years, so there's a bit of Australian in there as well. So I'm a real mix, and my mom is Chinese, so like I'm as international as I probably come. So thanks for having me. I want to talk about these today. I guess emojis are a fun way to maybe map your day. So right now I feel a little bit like that maybe. And then maybe after the presentation I'll sort of feel more up there. And I was actually wondering whether, you know that green face with the, like, maybe some of you feel like that. So the reason why I want to talk about emotions is I guess maybe picking up a little bit on what Cynthia spoke about yesterday in terms of tragic design. And we spoke a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning yesterday. So I want to dive into that topic a little bit more and touch on, I think, something that will become more and more important for us as user experience practitioners over the following coming years in the context of designing emotionally intelligent machines or designing emotionally intelligent services. And I think it's important to kind of touch on that now because we are at an interesting point in time where we're unshackling ourselves from terminals and desktop computers, and we're near a state of what some call ubiquitous computing. So basically, technology is all around us. We have universal connectivity. Everyone has one of these. The Internet of Things, as Greg kind of pointed out yesterday, is here now. I can't quite remember the number, but there'll be billions of devices with a URL address, over the next few years. So like it's basically happening. And I guess we're also moving away from interfaces to a world that sounds
currently
like this.
In Los Angeles at 69 degrees with clear skies.
So even now we need to start thinking about designing interfaces that are basically off-screen. Voice interaction. How do you interact with a machine via text or maybe even via intuition? It's not that designers have not thought about that, but I guess it has been somewhat simplistic. Designers have always thought about and tried to evoke emotions, and there's some beautiful examples like this sports car that is called the Austin Healey Sprite. It was produced in the United Kingdom, and it was affectionately called the frog eye or the bug eye. You can kind of see the eyes, like it's really, really cute. Or this lemon squeezer designed by Philip Stark for Alessi, and it's humorous, it melts form and function, and I guess in order to evoke an emotional response in the purchaser and the user of the product. And even when it came to designing computers or digital experiences, I guess we've always intended these to be likable and friendly. The smiling Mac is, I guess, a good manifestation of that. So maybe it's more accurate to say that we have been a little bit simplistic about this. We've even like as a UX designer, you think about user journeys and is the user happy? Is the user angry? Is the user frustrated? But it has been somewhat simplistic. So maybe it's more accurate to say that we have always somewhat designed for affection. And we have not really had the opportunity to think about the full emotional spectrum of emotions that we may need to think about. And here's why this is important. We are at a real inflection point. Technology is coming to a point in 2017 where machine learning is becoming mainstream. We'll all probably get around in self-driving cars very soon. Machines and services are already getting to a point where they will know us so well powered by big data and through anticipatory design, that they will be able to execute and make decisions on our behalf without us having to do anything. And, user interfaces, whether it be voice or screen, are kind of moving to that point too. What used to be personalization is now moving into adaptive UX. I found the talk on adaptive UX very interesting yesterday, and I guess it's sort of like a foray into this new world that we're kind of entering in. And then the final sort of piece of the puzzle is, I guess, that we, for the first time really ever, we have now technology that is able to detect users' emotions. And this is massive. I mean, if you really think about it, the term effective computing was first coined by MIT, I think in the mid-90s, and it sort of says that it systems and devices that can recognize, interpret, process, and simulate human effects. So I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. And I have a great video to maybe bring that to life for you a little bit more. This is a video of Steve
And I
Jobs
asked our folks, could we come up with a multi-touch
talking about
display
the invention of the iPhone.
that we type on, I could rest my hands on.
And this piece of software can analyze
and about
what he's
6 months
saying in
later,
real
they
time.
called me in and showed me this prototype display. And it was amazing. And I gave it to one of our guys.
And it comes very
This was
close
in the
to mind
early
reading.
90s. I mean, early 2000s. And I gave it to one of our other really brilliant UI folks. And he called me back a few weeks later, and he had inertial scrolling working and a few other things. Now, we were thinking about building a phone at that time. And when I saw the rubber band, inertial scrolling, and a few of the other things, I thought, my God, we can build a phone out of this.
Love you, Steve. I mean, that's crazy. So what happens when machine learning meets effective computing? And what do we as designers have to think about? And what do brands have to think about in order to ensure that we create, services and machines and experiences that are supportive and emotionally, positive, so that they look like this. This is the character from the movie Big Hero 6, I think it's called, and not like this. Terminator, Skynet, we've seen them all. Scary future. They all mine us for energy. We live in a virtual reality. You're actually not here. You're being farmed for your energy, etc. I'm just kidding. You're not. We're all here. We're good. So how do we think about designing emotionally intelligent machines? I think the first question that we need to ask ourselves is what we are actually trying to achieve. Because surely we're not trying to design, the full prosaic of full emotional response. Like, we don't want our users to be extremely happy, to be extremely sad. Like, I think that as designers, we have a responsibility to think about this in more nuanced terms. And some of the stuff that I'm talking about today hopefully will maybe just shed a little bit of light and maybe a starting point of how we should think about this. So, thank you, Cynthia. Do you want to talk about this? Or no, I can do it. Okay. So we obviously saw this yesterday, and it's actually quite nice that we're sort of maybe touching on some of the similar things, and I think hopefully you'll leave today or the conference and notice that there's sort of themes that are emerging. Like, we're kind of talking about this new world where you have machine learning, adaptive UX, like emotional design, like it all kind of. I think it paints like an interesting picture of what you will see in your career. And the types of things that you will be expected to do that are maybe not just designing beautiful wireframes or thinking about information architecture. And I think we should embrace that change, because ultimately it means that as designers we have more impact. I really enjoyed the talk about urban design and moving into, I guess, the built environment and the techniques that we can kind of use there. But yeah, so the Wheel of Emotions by Robert Plutchik, basically he wrote the textbook on human emotion, I think in the mid-'80s. So he's been doing this for a while. And he came up with this concept of basically 8 basic emotions for joy, trust, fear, surprise, etc. And the way that he's laying them out in this wheel of emotions, I guess, shows the interplay between those emotions, but also the intensities. So like the closer you get to the center, the more extreme you feel. So you go from serenity to joy to ecstasy. And that's what I was touching on before, that we don't want to necessarily design or create services or experiences that sit in that center, because that's probably not responsible. And I guess ultimately the point that I'm trying to make here is that emotions are complicated. Emotions are very complicated. And even happiness can be complicated. Are you happy because you're not sad anymore? I think we're sometimes a little bit simplistic, as I said before, in terms of users frustrated, users angry, users happy. And I think we have a responsibility to think about this in slightly more nuanced terms. So another reference point that I found very useful in putting this together is an American psychologist called Martin Seligman. And he has been an avid promoter in the field of positive psychology. So basically he's been thinking a lot about, he's developed a framework to think about the conditions that humans need in order to flourish. And so, just kind of reading a few things off screen here, we want to have positive emotions in our lives. We want to feel a sense of engagement and, authentic relationships in order to be happy as human beings. It's nice to have a purpose and a meaning in life. Like, I'm a designer and I feel much more purposeful because I have something that I do that I love, and hopefully you feel all the same about what you do. Others have it through family, everyone is different. And then I guess the last one is a sense of achievement and feeling that you're actually accomplishing things. So when you put the first letters together, PERMA, he calls it the PERMA framework. And that's been a really useful way for me to learn about, I guess, the human condition and to kind of start learning about the space a little bit more. So I guess the question is, how can services play a role in helping humans flourish? So ultimately, that's what we're here to do, to create positive experiences and, I guess, having more and more responsibility with the technology that's available to us now. Well, we asked a bunch of people. At the beginning of 2017, Huge interviewed owners of an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, and we spent some time asking them what in an ideal world their gadget would do for them. And there was a number of sort of major categories that emerged. So, some people wanted their conversational AI to be an assistant. So, things like, tell me the weather, tell me about my day, what meetings do I have coming up, remember someone's birthday, etc. Others wanted their conversational UI to do chores for them, like do the laundry, order me groceries, reorder the Seamless that I had last night, and I'm lazy and I just want to eat Seamless again. Oh, you know Seamless? I'm sure you know Seamless, yeah. Other participants, like the third sort of group, wanted their conversational UI to make them smarter, so help me look up contextual topics, or maybe even help me learn about a deeper topic in more detail. And then the last group was keen on their conversation UI to be the connector to all the other devices and things in your living room, so to basically play well with other services. But wait, there's more. So when we asked the focus group what their ideal relationship should be with an AI, we got this little quote, and I hope you can hear it.
I said best friend, because many times when you walk home, there are people there and they're listening to you, and you need those ears that are going to, okay, I understand. Oh, that's great. You need that pat on the back when you come home, and sometimes they're not listening to you, so that's a best friend.
Interesting. So almost like morale
booster. Morale booster, just instead of paying to shrink.
Yeah.
You go there, you talk to your AI, you're relieved, okay, now I can move on.
Personal advisor instead of a personal assistant.
Personal advisor. Great.
Isn't that crazy? Just a friend, you come home, how was your day, honey? Oh, yeah, it's good. Had a shitty day. Oh, you're okay, you're beautiful. Don't have to pay the shrink the money, just have your Amazon Alexa tell you how nice you are. So the key insight for us here was quite interesting. When machines talk, people assume relationships. And I guess it's a very powerful medium, voice, compared to, via text or any other interaction, that you immediately assume that there's some sort of a friendly relationship that you have with the UI. And the expectations, range from empathy to emotional support, like the guy that I was just showing you. One person that named their Echo after their mom. Another person that named the Echo after their baby. I mean, that's a little bit crazy, but hey, that's what users tell us. So, I guess that's the world that we now live in. So let's move ahead, and I want to talk a little bit about the technology that's available that can help us to detect emotions. It's a growing market, so it's estimated that the emotion detection and recognition software market is worth $36 billion US, 36 million US dollars by 2021. So it's big, and we should probably pay attention and care. So the first one is facial recognition. It's probably the one that's most advanced and most ready to use. So the way that it works is that the face is plotted into different points, and they're distinguished between pivotal points, like fixed points, and striking points, like points on your face that move. And there's basically micro expressions that kind of give away how you're feeling. So even if you're not consciously thinking about it, machines can pick up on the fact that, like it's kind of quite amazing what it can actually do. So here's sort of like an illustration of like the points on the face that, through computer vision and webcams, you can actually start analyzing and understanding like how someone is feeling. You kind of give away your emotions, maybe even if you don't think, that you are. Here's an example by a company called Real Eyes that has developed a software that can read emotions. This is an actress, and you can see how, it can kind of tell her level of happiness, surprise, sad, disgust, fear, confusion, etc. So we're living in the future, my friends. The second technology area that is somewhat mature and is starting to appear in commercial markets is voice recognition. So the Steve Jobs example that I just showed you was done by a company called Beyond Verbal. And it works by capturing sentiment and voice through a number of frequency characteristics, time-related features, and voice quality. So here's a software that the University of Trento has developed. So you can upload an audio file. It's German, so it's okay that you don't understand it. And it can basically read and detect the level of anger. This is the boredom category.
Das schwarze Blatt Papier befindet sich da oben neben dem Holzstück.
The black piece of paper is next to the piece of wood. What's interesting about this, I'll just skip forward, is that with audio detection, it is dependent on the language and the cultural context. So you kind of need to set the language before you can run the algorithm, because a German speaker will intonate differently compared to a Portuguese or Brazilian speaker or an English speaker. Whereas with facial recognition, it's global. So no matter where you are in the world, we all share the same way that we are frustrated, angry, etc. So I thought that was interesting to point out. The last one, just quickly touching on, is very much emerging, but it's been very much hyped due to the wearables market. So biometrics essentially detect a combination of heart rate, skin temperature, and movement in order to derive like how someone is feeling, whether someone's stressed. So it's not sort of comprehensive, and much more testing is needed. There's wristbands, headbands, thumb readers, but the most interesting that we've come across is basically a patch that you put on your skin. It's like a little, like a transparent, translucent sticker. And it can detect currency on the skin, and it can read chemical composition. So something to look out for. I think we'll see more of that. But compared to the other ones, probably still more in the developing phase. Okay, so we've spoken about the technology, but This is really important. This stuff works really well in a lab environment. It works really well with actors, like the actors that I showed you before. But real life is complicated. You might have just broken up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and then you start interacting with a machine or a service, and the machine or service doesn't know about your emotional state. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that this stuff needs to be tested and validated a lot more in real life. So it's still very much emerging, but it's kind of great for you to be aware of this stuff now so that you're ready, maybe when this stuff becomes more mature. Okay, so but at a high level, the way that this is meant to work is that the user comes to, starts engaging with a machine or a service and they give emotional clues, and based on the technology that we have, we can hopefully detect how they're feeling or what sort of mood they're in. The machine or the service then will try and overlay the context, so like what context are we having this interaction. The algorithm will then create a response, an output that will, I guess, cause a reaction or outcome in the user, and then that reaction gets captured by the algorithm, gets fed back in so that the machine gets smarter over time. That's sort of roughly how it's meant to work, if we keep it really simple. So how do we make sure we get this right? And how do we make sure that we kind of understand all the inputs and outputs that we need to be aware of? Javier Hernandez is a researcher at the Effective Computing Group at MIT. And I think he coins it quite nicely. Effective computing is like nuclear power. We have to be responsible in defining how to use it. Here's a little example of what not to do. In 2014, Facebook got a bit of negative press. They got a bit of heat, essentially, because they ran an experiment on their users' feeds. So they manipulated the feed of, I think, almost 700,000 users, and they tried to test whether reducing the number of positive messages on someone's feed would make that user post less positive messages. Or if you flip it, they tried to test whether removing like negative wording or negative messages on someone's feed would make that user post fewer, sad or gloomy updates. And it worked. But the problem was that they didn't ask those users for permission. So I guess the conclusion was that it was somewhat manipulative and unethical. This is really important to keep in mind, that we need to have users' permissions in order to manipulate their emotions. Otherwise, we're going down a very slippery path. This is a little clip from the movie Ex Machina, where the robot, the machine, essentially seduces him to go on a date with her.
This is what I'd wear on a date.
I have to turn it up a little bit.
Right, first a traffic intersection, then maybe a show.
He's like, oh, yeah, maybe.
I'd like us to go on a date.
Kind of nice looking.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go on a date with you.
Yeah. It'd be fun.
So she's manipulating his emotions into believing that she's actually, his girlfriend, that she's friendly, that he can trust her, when in reality she's a killer. And so I think you could say that AI already has a bit of a brand problem, because we've all seen Terminator. We all know what happens. And examples like the Facebook example, I guess, are just a good reminder that we need to be really mindful of what we're actually doing here. Okay, so Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft, kind of reminds us of this too. He says that we need to do much more research in understanding the human condition, the human cognition, and that we're really just starting to scrape the surface. So what you might see in your career is, I guess, that I'm not sure if we're all going to turn into psychologists. I mean, that's like a degree that you need to study. But I think as UX designers, we need to at least have a better vocabulary and a better understanding of the human condition, and that we can't just sort of like say users happy, users sad in a user journey. Like we'll need to be more nuanced than that. Okay, so how do we tie this all together? What is a framework for doing the right thing so that we can work out when and how to apply emotional responses to services? So first up, we need to establish the desire for emotion and the permission to play. So let me unpack that a little bit more for you. So some questions that we might want to ask ourselves is, what is the user's emotional state? What are the user's ambitions? What is the nature of the interaction that we're trying to design? And what is the overall context? Yeah, so that's sort of the first area of investigation, I guess. Then we look at the permission to play. So do we have the right user? Is it the right context? Has the user given you permission? I keep coming back to that. Like, are we actually entering into an agreement that we can actually manipulate the user's emotions, essentially? And as a brand and as a service, do you have the right value proposition? We don't want to just do this for the sake of doing it. You know, like, just because we have the technology doesn't mean that we should just, like, do it because we can. Do you have the right intelligence in order to actually derive, like, you know, what a user is going through? And coming back to Cynthia, what is the danger of being wrong? Because, you know, like, when you're talking about emotions, like, you can really hurt somebody. And I guess that's something that we really need to keep in mind. Okay, so I'll come back to this framework a little bit later, but just to kind of get your head into the space of, we can map these two questions into a 2x2. So just put that in your head, and we'll revisit it. So the next question then is, like, what is the proper emotional response? Like, you know, how can we kind of think about this? In our research, we've identified sort of, I guess, three categories or three groupings, and I'll take you through. So the first one is to essentially react like a machine. So we can acknowledge emotions in a decision-making process, but the output is like a machine. There's no emotion in the way that we kind of respond back to the user. So this will really apply best to transactional situations or security moments. So think of a call center, you know, when you call and you're like, 0, 1, what's your name? I don't understand. So we can take your frustration or your emotion, and through the algorithm, we can almost kind of develop like a giant switchboard that will route the user in the right direction. So if I maybe start crying on the phone, maybe it's time to just get the operator on the phone. I mean, hopefully you're not going to make me cry, but I've spoken to AT&T before, and, you know, anyway. The second area of investigation, there's a few startups that are looking at assisted driving. And so if we can detect that a driver is tired, angry, inattentive, so it's essentially dangerous to be on the road, the car could stop over and pull over by the side of the road in order to ensure that you're safe. And, you know, I think that actually makes a lot of sense. And I hear that road rage is a real thing. I don't know, traffic, I haven't been to Rio yet, but I'm sure there's a bit of road rage in Rio. I'm going tomorrow, so I'll report back. And you can already tell Google Home to shut the fuck up. And all it does is it goes quiet. That's it. Not acknowledging that you've just insulted me essentially as a machine. Just go quiet. What did you say? I'm also confused. No, what did you say? I was like, oh, okay. The second sort of way that we can kind of think of this is to react like an extension of self. This is probably the one that is closest to the idea of a servant or like an emotional support system. So we acknowledge and we interpret emotions, but the user is in control of changing the emotions.
I will scan you for
Here's a
injuries.
little example.
Don't scan me.
Scan complete.
Unbelievable.
You have sustained
Turn up
no
a bit.
injuries. However, your hormone and neurotransmitter levels indicate that you are experiencing mood swings, common in adolescence. Diagnosis? Puberty.
Whoa, what?
Puberty. What? I like this quote. This is Professor Judith Mastoff from Aberdeen University, and she says, I would like people to have their own guardian angel that could support them emotionally throughout the day. I don't know if you've seen the movie Her, where the protagonist falls in love with the AI, and I think it's such a beautiful portrayal of things going terribly wrong or just right. I guess it's up to you to decide, but I highly recommend that you watch it. It's a beautiful movie, I feel. There's also some software that's being developed to detect emotions in the classroom. So if you're in a teaching environment, Can we determine, what students are going through in terms of their learning process? And is there a way to adjust the learning plan based on, what students are going through? We need to be really responsible in understanding how we actually read emotions. Again, student is happy, student is sad. I think you need to be trained as an educator to understand what the responses are and to adjust the plan accordingly. But it's interesting that we're starting to think about applications in real-world use. Okay, and then the last one is to essentially react like a human. So this is sort of, I guess, the place where we agree, where the machine and the user enter an agreement where the machine can actually manipulate the user's emotions for the user's benefit, essentially. So we can diagnose and interpret emotions and then maybe give advice or give triggers to change the emotional state that I'm currently in.
It's a different kind of
just one little clip.
You are my patient. I would like to help.
You can't fix this one, buddy.
He's depressed and he's like, I can help you.
What are you doing?
I am downloading a database on personal loss. Database downloaded. Treatments include contact with friends and loved ones.
And then basically
I
starts
am
to
contacting
contact
them
all
now.
the
No.
all the friends. He's like, no, too much too soon.
Now what are you doing?
Hugging.
Other treatments include compassion
Do we see like
and
a
physical
machine
reassurance.
cradling?
Okay,
I think that's a
really.
bit weird.
You will be all right.
Hey Alexa, I'm really
And
sad.
you can already ask Alexa, I'm sad.
I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. Sometimes talking to a friend, listening to music,
Go for
or
a
even
walk.
taking a walk can help. I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you, Alexa. So I guess we're kind of already here.
When was the last
but
time
the
you
area of
felt
machine
really
therapy is really interesting, where like for cases where you don't really want to talk to a
try
human,
to stay happy.
post-traumatic stress
I'd
disorder,
rather be happy.
you basically talk to a virtual therapist.
My kids keep me going.
What advice would you have given yourself 10 or 20 years ago?
To not believe, to not be so gullible, I've been told recently that I have a tendency to believe people too readily without them having to prove anything. And so as a result, recently I've gotten myself in a lot of trouble. And so I think that looking back, if I could have, I would tell myself to not believe, to not be so stupid, and to think, and just to not be so gullible.
Wow. So I do find it interesting that I guess, I don't know if you've ever spoken to like a psychologist about your sort of problems, but I guess it's an interesting point to make that maybe it's easier when you talk to a machine like that sits on a virtual couch, and you're essentially just talking to yourself, and the machine kind of just triggers you to talk about the emotional state, that might be easier. And it's important to point out here too that this is not to replace a human, but this is a way to gather information so that a human can still make decisions. So this is not replacing the shrink, but this might be just a way for you to, maybe start gathering some information that a human then can act on. Okay, so we have react like a machine, or react like an extension of self, react like a human, and we've got our 2x2, and I guess we can now start mapping those in. So let's do it. When there's no desire for emotion and no permission to play, we probably shouldn't do anything, right? Shouldn't. If there is high desire for emotion and low permission to play, we may want to create something or a service that reacts like a machine. So we still allow emotional input, but the output lacks any emotion, like the call center example that I mentioned. If there's low desire for emotion and high permission to play, we can react like an extension of self. And then ultimately, if both are high, then we can design something that is, more human-like in the experience that we create. So, just to kind of summarize things, I hope that you have found some of that information useful and interesting. Let's remember that when it comes to designing emotionally intelligent services or machines, that we need to have agreement on intentions. Again, permission, really, really important. We should only really design for what can be understood, and we shouldn't be renegades in this is not the Wild West, because, this is serious business when it comes to engaging users in an emotional context. And like any relationship, we should aim for a gradual progression of intimacy. So you probably want to buy me a drink first before you take me home. So just keep that in mind. I mean, that's that way. This is a quote by the CEO of Affectiva, one of the software companies that I mentioned before. And she says, in 10 years, we won't remember what it was like when we couldn't just frown at our device and it would respond, oh, you didn't like that, did you? And I don't think we're really that far off. So I think we can get excited about that future, and we should prepare ourselves. So the impact is that user expectations will shift. Natural emotional interactions will become the norm in ubiquitous computing. Brands will be able to form a much deeper connection with people than they have before. And for us, for you guys, a thorough understanding of emotional psychology will become important in the design field. So a lot to think about, but I think it's an exciting future if we think about it responsibly. Valeu.
I remember watching her, and I remember watching the scene where he starts talking to her and they are discussing, and he stopped her and say, "Why are you breathing? You're a robot. You don't need to breathe." And then her start to talk like, "I'm just trying like to create that empathy with you." And I remember also hearing the interview with the girl who does the voice of the Google on the maps, and her saying like, we need to, when we are recording the voice, we need to make like a robot voice. If we speaking like natural voice, the person missed the road like they need to go, like turn right. If I say like this in a natural voice, the driver doesn't get the message. And the question I have is, you said like we need to get the permission from the user to say like we are reacting like as a human or as a robot. But in some occasions, can we like decide if what's better is we should decide the reaction? And I don't know, the question I'm trying to is when we should decide and when we should ask the user what reaction we should have.
Right. Okay. I think that that is a very good question. I think that it comes down to the context in the interaction that you're having. And that's what I tried to outline before. If it's like a very transactional situation like a call center, that is a completely different context when compared to you downloading an AI and the AI actually becoming your emotional support system. And you know what? We're actually not there yet. This is all a little bit science fiction up until this point in time, but it's raising some really important questions like the one that you pointed out, like, to what extent, like when I download the AI, do I need to sign a piece of paper or contract that says I'm willing to have that computer manipulate my emotions? But I think it is really important to at least make clear that what's about to happen, or what some of the downsides or the negatives might be of you engaging with a machine in that sort of way. And I think it requires a lot more research on our behalf. So I don't have an answer for you, but I think it's a really important point to raise and something that we should all think about. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. And let's assume that as it's expectable, we keep on doing research, we get more data, Now everyone has a personal tracking device over, so it's easy to do that. And going forward, we learn to design more emotional, intelligent machines. So my question is that going to help us to educate or grow or inspire more emotional, intelligent humans, do you believe?
I really, somebody said yesterday, it may have been Greg, that the best way that we can work with AI is to actually have a collaboration between human and computer. And so I actually very much believe in a future where machines may help us to become better human beings, you know, like where machines may help us to work out new ways to play Go. So I personally believe that there's a way that we can actually benefit from machine interactions and that we don't end up in the future where we're being exploited or where it's sort of turning negative. And I think it's actually the people in this room and the designers that are actually having like much more influence now on maybe determining, you know, what that might look like. We're not computer scientists, we're not, you know, cognitive psychologists, but I think when it comes to defining the frameworks in which those interactions will take place, I actually think that we can benefit from learning from a machine maybe in ways that you can't when you're engaging with humans. That's my personal take, and I guess we need to wait and see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heiko!